Podcast. We are here with your hosts, Dave Reed, Ryan Wilkinson, and Joey Gallo.
Welcome in to the NSFW Dynasty Podcast. I am your host, Dave Reed, joined by my co-hosts, Ryan Wilkinson and Joey Gallo.
We're back
everyone.
this week, boys.
I know.
To be back.
I feel like I haven't seen you in forever, Joe.
Got the whole crew. It's a special day. So special, we brought in a special guest as well. He has been the front man for Dan's team for years. He's more of a figurehead for that team. But we brought him in. The name is Matt Rosinski. Welcome to the pod.
Thanks, guys, for having me.
I was really hoping we'd get Dan, but I guess Matt will have to do.
I know. He's too busy actually running the team.
Maybe we should just set the record straight at the early on in the podcast. How much of the managing is he doing relative to you?
So to be honest, in our Albany league, Dan and I have been doing this for years together. It's actually we don't do anything unless we run it by each other.
Okay.
So it actually is 50-50.
Nice.
But I will say, I was half expecting you guys to have Mike Williams pop in here, my arch nemesis. But I'm a little disappointed, but it's all right.
It is the NSFW podcast, but it's still that he's too much for that. Like, there's not a label strong enough for Mike Williams to be on this pod. But we got a special one for you guys today. Week 12 is in the books. Our trade deadline passed, so we're actually going to do a post-mortem on in-season trades, kind of take a look what were some of our favorite trades and some values and flops that we saw. But also, obviously, do our normal run-through of Week 12. And as always, when we have a special guest, we got the DK Lineup Challenge. But first, we're going to jump into the medical ward. This has been a staple. Players keep getting hurt, but this one's actually a little bit lighter than most weeks, and we actually have some players coming back. But first, the bad news. Jonathan Taylor. This was a surprise on, I believe, Tuesday. He is going to have thumb surgery and be out 2 to 4 weeks. So that's a pretty major loss for a player who was looking like he was finally ramping up and going to be an RB1 to finish the season. Kenneth Walker is doubtful again for Thursday Night Football with that oblique injury. So you're going to see Charbonnet be the lead back again. Chris Olave left the Week 12 matchup with a concussion. He's still TBD for this week, but something to monitor. But Rashid Shaheed, who is running mate there in New Orleans now, injured his quad, and he's probably going to miss this week and likely a week after that. Demario Douglas, who is turning in a pretty solid rookie season, left early with a hard shot to the head and neck. He did pass the concussion protocol, but still TBD if he'll play this week. Amari Cooper took a pretty tough shot to the ribs, but the x-rays did come back negative, so he should be okay for this week. And Dorian Thomas Robinson, DTR, not DTMR, very close. He had a concussion from a pretty nasty shot, and they did sign Flacco, so there is a chance that we start seeing an elite quarterback in Joe Flacco back on the field. But there are also a few other players that hopefully do come back. My team especially needs Devon Achane in the worst way to come back. He did not. The only news we got there is he did not suffer a setback during the last week. So who knows if he's playing this week, but he didn't get worse apparently. So fingers crossed. T. Higgins has a chance to play, but it's Monday Night Football. I don't think you can put him in your lineup, but something to monitor, and that seems like more optimistic for Week 14. Dallas Goedert, he fractured his forearm earlier. He's pushing to play this week. Still iffy if that will happen, but Week 14 seems like a very good chance. Justin Jefferson still kept missing it. He's on bye this week, but he was finally activated, and he will be playing Week 14. And Aaron Rodgers is designated to return from the IR for who knows why. No idea why he's doing this move, but he looks like he is actually trying to play this season. They have 3 weeks to get him activated with the window now being open. So we'll see if he can make the Jets less pathetic to close out the season. But which of these injuries or returns are standing out the most to you guys?
Yeah, so I'll jump in on Jonathan Taylor, right? So they say 2 to 4 weeks. They say they're going to try and get him back quickly, and they're obviously not eliminated from playoff contention, so they have incentive to get him back. You saw, though, that coming back from the suspension, the pup earlier in the year, the previous injury. It took him, you mentioned him getting ramped up. It took him a while to get ramped up. I think the first game he was back, Zach Moss still put up better numbers, got more carries. Zach Moss is going to get opportunity now too. So I just feel like it's a weird situation with Taylor where by the time he comes back, it's going to be week 16, week 17. You're going to have tough decisions to make in the playoffs if your team's still alive. So if I'm a Taylor owner, I'm kind of not really counting on him at all, really, until the very, very end, if I'm lucky to even be alive at that point. And if I have Zach Moss, then you basically found yourself starting running back the rest of the way. So pretty fortunate.
Yeah, I feel like Jonathan Taylor's really the only major one there. Most of the other guys should be back within a week or two. The only other thing I'll say is if Olave and Shaheed both do miss this week, Michael Thomas is on IR, so who knows who will be catching the ball for the Saints. But yeah, otherwise nothing too crazy. And then the
Kamara, by the way, it'll be Kamara.
Kamara, yeah, I guess it will all just go to the running back. Yeah. Yeah, nothing too crazy other than that.
I saw something today that was like Olave practiced in a limited fashion.
Please.
Which was like a good first sign.
Yeah.
But, there's still kind of – it wasn't the worst concussion you've ever seen, right? Like he landed on his head rather than taking a blow to the head from a defender, but –
And usually with concussions, if you start practicing early, that's usually a good sign. It's when you start missing practices, like you don't clear the protocol, but you're starting to get reps in. So that he's trending the right way. So I also need him.
Yeah, Taylor hurts pretty bad.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have any shares of him. I know you do, and don't have Moss, but I think you'll be okay. You have a lot of depth there.
I mean, I guess it's having depth at running back is always a good thing, right? But the downfall for us is we lost Taylor and Zach Moss. The Mikes both have the Mikes.
Oh, yeah.
And we're playing them this week. So if you look at our, the projected points, they kind of evened out, not fully, but they're a lot closer than I would have liked. So that was kind of that was a tough one.
Seeing the fortune flip like that in Dynasty is the fun and devastating part about it, because there's again stud players like Jonathan Taylor that are staples of your lineup. Zach Moss maybe an afterthought on your bench. Maybe they were looking to ship him, and boom, all of a sudden you got another valuable asset. I wish that would happen to me a bit more often, but it's all right. We're moving on. But
yeah, like that. It's funny how when a guy gets hurt on your redraft team, it's all right, let's see who I have on my bench. Let's see who I can get from the waiver wire. When someone gets hurt on your dynasty team, unless it's a position of depth, you're just what kind of piece of shit am I going to throw in there this week?
Yeah, because you're not scouring the waivers, and now our trade deadline's passed. So I'm just God, this is dire. But
I basically just hope for 2 points for whoever I throw in because there's nothing left.
Or Devon A-Chain doesn't play, so Raheem Mostert is the starter once again.
Yeah, but that's why I keep throwing Justin Watson in my lineup. I've started Justin Watson 5 times this year, which is more than I ever wanted to start Justin Watson, but it's been paying off.
At this point, you probably got to start him even if you have better options because he's getting a lot of targets.
Stay in the flames. Yeah. But, I mean, that's a good point. Why don't we move into the overall discussion on how Week 12 went? Because Justin Watson will do that as the segue because we're pros here. He did have another touchdown this week. But with it, I did one thing because I'm also a Mahomes owner in another league. It seems like Mahomes' ceiling is kind of capped right now. He's not having any of these blow-up games that you expect from him. But you did see Rashid Rice really step up, maybe start, usurping, I like to call, for Justin Watson into the wide receiver 1 role. But Pacheco really seems to be the star there. It's the player who, coming into the season, you weren't sure we were going to have. He looks like he's potentially a top 15 running back going forward.
Yeah, he's amazing. Every single time he touches the ball, I'm just this guy is so incredibly good. It was last year when he first came on, it was a lot of camp hype and, I
7th rounder, I think.
Yeah. But he's insanely good. He's honestly one of my favorite running backs to watch in the whole league.
He's tiny too, but he runs fierce. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned Mahomes, but his ceiling just hasn't been there. But 2 quarterbacks who have had the ceilings, the Bills and the Eagles, quite the game there for the week. Both teams just kind of went crazy from a fantasy perspective, and it was also an amazing game. But the Bills just keep losing for some reason. Feel like they keep having big offensive days, but not actually pulling out the win in the game. But again, Josh Allen had 4 touchdowns. On the other side, Hurts had, I think it was 5 touchdowns, right?
3 passing, 2 rushing. And Phil Yates mentioned it was the first time ever that 2 quarterbacks in the same game had at least 2 passing and at least 2 rushing touchdowns each, which is pretty wild, especially if you own both those quarterbacks like one of our esteemed hosts.
It's partially why I had to mention it, but no, it also was an amazing game.
It was weird because it didn't feel like that for most of it either, because I was watching initially like the first half of it, then I had to start getting the kids ready, and then I kept checking my phone. I'm like, what is going on in this game? It was like a dud at the first half, but those 2 quarterbacks and offenses, like it takes like 10 seconds to get down the field, so they can now ramp up the points real quick.
Yeah, for sure.
But another big showing that I know that the team's getting, our league is getting excited about. At least for me, I have him in one dynasty league. I know Joe has him in ours. The Falcons with Bijan. He is finally showing up, which is scary if you're playing a Bijan owner right now because they have a pretty good schedule going forward. And he didn't have the we talked about earlier in the pot earlier this season. He didn't have the strong start this season you wanted, but he looks like he's going to be a potential league winner. But Joe, as an owner, what are your thoughts on what you're seeing out of Atlanta?
I'm happy to see him getting red zone activity. There's still more Tyler Algier than I'd like. Like I was watching that game, and just like whenever you kind of see like a lumbering guy running directly into his O-line's back, I'm like, this must be Tyler Algier. But it's good to see that they're giving Bijan more looks in the red zone, and he's super elusive and does stuff with them. So and he's getting targets too, and he's doing stuff with those as well. So
that was a great catch too. That wasn't just like a little in the backfield catch and run. Like he caught that over the shoulder. Ritter is not good, but he has moments, and that was a decent pass for him. I know you hate Ritter though.
I didn't think he was very good in college, and I don't think he's great now. But I think I'm biased just because I had a very negative view of Atlanta early in the season because of the way that they were using Bijan. So as long as he's getting quality looks, then Desmond Ritter can throw terrible interceptions to blow the game all he wants.
Well, they won, and I think they're leading the division now, which is just wild.
That's what I was going to say. I feel like they're the opposite of the Bills. Like the Bills put up these huge offensive numbers, but they just can't win. And then the Falcons are the opposite. They just keep winning somehow, and I feel like they're not that good, but they win.
Are you saying the Bills need to hire Arthur Smith? Is that what you're saying, Ryan?
I don't think that would solve it, but
no. But another huge game that is good. It's kind of setting the stage for the future of this division was the Jags versus the Texans, because you had 2 young franchise quarterbacks and Trevor Lawrence and CJ Stroud going back to back, like punch for punch there. And the Jags did come out on top, but both teams had a great showing. And there was a lot of fantasy goodness to be had there. Trevor Lawrence, I just want to say, after a QB1 performance last week, QB6 this week, dominating. He's getting some touchdowns now, which is great to see. Ridley's flashing, which is helping Lawrence's ascension, and Kirk was still solid. Ingram still is not getting touchdowns, but getting solid work. But ETN is kind of like, it seems like if Lawrence does well, ETN doesn't do well, and vice versa. So it really depends on who gets the touchdowns there. So ETN hasn't really been efficient really most of the year, I think, in the ground, but he's been getting the touchdowns. So you take those away, and he hasn't been as getting the ceiling that you wanted. And from the Texan side, CJ Stroud, I mean, we just say it every week. He was great, making the players look good, but Tank Dell might be the best rookie wide receiver in this class right now. I'm not going to say that for sure, but you have to start putting him in that discussion. He had another great outing for 5 for 50 and a touchdown, and Collins got in the mix, and Singletary still dominating work, and you're worried about Dameon Pierce if you're an owner there. But where are you guys taking that game?
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted Houston to pull it out personally. Might have had him money line. But it was impressive that the way that they fought back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice to see that. The one comment that I'll make about watching CJ Stroud is just like he extends the play a lot in the backfield. He's always looking for receivers open downfield, and he usually finds receivers open downfield. But I just feel like he takes big hits back there too. Like he runs around, and before you know it, like he just kind of gets sized up, and I'm just like worried that he's gonna like run around too long. Like he could probably benefit from throwing it away and not taking like these massive hits. That being said, he played a great game. He probably could have. I don't remember the exact situation on that last drive, but it was like a second or third down, and trying to make the first down rather than just pick up another like 5 to 10 yards. Like he could have either ran it or like thrown just a short pass that would have brought the field goal a little bit closer rather than just like going for to make the whatever they had to gain like 20 something yards, 25 yards because he got sacked. And that ended up obviously costing them because the field goal ended up like hitting the crossbar.
Yeah.
So, but he's a rookie after all. He's human. Still an amazing game. Still a top, probably at this point 6 or 7 dynasty quarterback for fantasy. And
every week I feel like you just are like, yeah, this guy is elite.
Yeah, fun to watch and fun game.
Yeah, and another game, more so, it's just I believe this was on Thanksgiving, the Thursday night. The last game was the 49ers and the Seahawks. More so just saying that Christian McCaffrey's still doing CMC things. 2 touchdowns. This guy's a cheat code. I was like looking at total points for all players, and he's like, if he was a quarterback, I think he'd be like the QB like 8 or something. Like the guy at a running back position, which is just crazy. That's especially in the super flex, like you could have gone one quarterback if you had CMC, which someone did, because again, such an advantage there. Purdy was just okay, but the main reason why I called that out is there were 3 rush touchdowns. So Purdy had a good matchup, didn't get the point you wanted to. CMC obviously got 2 of them, but Debo was starting to look pretty good. And wanted to start calling that out because he did get the other rushing touchdown there and got some work in the passing game. So
I gave Debo a very strong look for my lineup this week against Philadelphia.
I may have added him in. That's also why I'm talking about it. But Ayuk was good. I also want to call it out because we had a touchdown parlay, one player from each game, and Ayuk was the last one. He got a late touchdown for us to seal that win for us. But Ayuk only had 2 catches, but he is continually coming through and getting those deeper shots off of like play action, which you love to see. But in Seattle was a mess. Charbs was like he got the work, was inefficient, but more so is that all 3 wide receivers weren't good, great. But I really want to see what you guys think about JSN because I love his long-term potential, but I just don't think he's helping anyone this year.
No, not this year.
Yeah, and I think Geno Smith has kind of taken a step back, which is a big part of it. So you're just not seeing the production from DK Lockett and JSN. So we'll see what happens next year. But yeah, this year is probably kind of over for them.
Yeah, and I don't think the NFL did Seahawks any favors with their schedule. I mean, you go 49ers. I think they have Dallas, right?
Yep.
And then do they have 49ers again next week?
I think they have them again before the end of the season.
I want to say it was like 3 weeks they had like the 49ers. I mean, Geno is not like the quarterback you want in general. I mean, but
yeah, there's a lot of divisional games where you play the same team in like a 3-week period. Like I know it's the Texans and the Titans have that. I know the Giants and the Eagles have that, which is going to be a bloodbath. But yeah, that's playing against the 49ers is you're not going to have a good statistical day. So that you understand like a lot of those players' stat lines are going to be reduced a bit, but it's more
schedule is okay.
Yeah, after this
brutal stretch of San Francisco, Dallas, San Francisco, they get Philadelphia, whose passing defense is not great at the moment, and then Tennessee and Pittsburgh. So they have an okay passing schedule.
Yeah,
but I don't know that signals good things to come for JSN without injury. And like I'm all in on JSN as a prospect. I think if he was in an offense, like if he was getting the opportunities that Jordan Addison was getting, he would be putting up the same exact numbers, and he's been just as impressive with the opportunities he's had. The problem is he's got two really good receivers ahead of him. He's the third, probably fourth option in the offense.
Yeah, I mean, he made one amazing catch in that game, but I think that's really what's coming down. People thought he was just going to supplant Lockett, I think was like because Lockett's older, and Lockett's got staying power. And we'll see what happens in the offseason and with that wide receiver room, but until Lockett moves on or ages out, like JSN's upside is going to be limited, I think.
They have years left. I think Lockett's got 2 more years left. 1 year, 2 years left on his deal, and then they can cut him. They have an out after 1 year for less dead cap hit. And Metcalf just signed, so like they have I've been trying, like Sluter knows, I've literally had spent the last 2 months trying to acquire him and unsuccessfully, but because I'm in on the talent, but every time I want to like bump my offer up, I go to, Spotrac and I look at the contract situation for Lockett and Metcalf, and I'm just like, these guys stay healthy. It could be a while.
Yeah, exactly. Like the talent's undeniable, but situation does matter. And then quarterbacks, it's going to be up in the air in Seattle in the near future too. So we'll see what happens there. But for a quarterback that won't be going anywhere, at least in the near future, but the quarterback that did leave, Frank Wright is out in Carolina. I mean, that team is one of the worst looking teams I've seen in a while, especially with a number 1 overall pick. Obviously you don't expect the rookies to be amazing out of the gate, but I don't know, maybe it is the coaching, but it's hard to imagine how bad Bryce Young would be. But that whole offense just fell apart, especially this past week. Thielens did nothing. He went 1 for 2 yards. Sanders had 28 yards, and how many carries do you think that was? 15. He's getting a lot of work, and he just stinks. And Mingo, he flashed a little bit, but he also like ran out of bounds when he could have cut a ball. So like I don't know, things are just a mess there. And yeah, it's just terrible to see that happen to a young quarterback. But what do you guys thought? Do you think things are going to improve for Bryce without Frank Wright, or what?
I think it's going to take some time. Like you said, I think it's kind of a whole team issue here. Like Thielen, kind of came out of nowhere and was the wide receiver 1 and was having huge fantasy days. But the reality is he's not someone you really want as your wide receiver 1 right now. So that coupled with Sanders just not being good and Mingo being the only other real option there, I think is going to hold him back for a little bit. But hopefully it helps and he turns it around a little bit and then can have a more productive year 2.
I think it's even worse. They don't even have a first-round pick this year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's right?
Yeah, they got to go into free agency and have to get a guy like a T. Higgins or someone over there to help Bryce or something, but it is brutal there. And also, if you own Thielen, especially with the head coach being out there, you don't know what the offense is now going to look like. He was being featured early on. They made a change with the play caller, so his value might be drying up with his age. So we'll see. And I think he's younger than us, so that's like weird to say. But also another big game, not a fun one exactly to watch, was the Steelers-Bengals. I think this was the first time the Steelers had 400 yards of offense in like over 2.5 years or something like that, which is just a crazy stat to say. I think it was the longest one. But the biggest winner out of that game was Pat Freiermuth. Muth is Luth. He got back. I don't know. We're obviously a tight end premium league. I want to see how high you guys are kind of viewing Freiermuth going forward.
So the Bengals this year, for whatever reason, I have no idea. I don't know when I was alerted to this. It was at some point when I was doing like research before a primetime game trying to decide who to put in my parlay. But apparently they have like a historically terrible defense against the tight end. So I kind of like I had the thought like, oh, maybe this will be a week for Freiermuth. I'm high on him, but I wanna see it another time or two beyond just the against the Bengals, because I kind of had a thought going into that game that it might be a good opportunity, and they literally threw it to him on the first pass of the game for like 30 yards up the seam. And it was kind of just like, all right, well, clearly their coaching is aware that this team can't cover the tight end because they're throwing to him right away. They threw the ball to him like twice over the last 2 weeks. So I think I mean, he's great. He's been great for even earlier this season before he got hurt. You know, he had a couple big games, a couple big touchdown passes, receptions. So not incredibly high on him at the moment, right? I wouldn't say like top 5, but like, you know, maybe like in the 8 to 10 range.
I like that. I'm with it. Also, other players that stepped up was Najee Harris actually had a good game. Warren had a fumble. He's if you listen to pod, you know I love Warren, but that was not his best game. And from the Bengals side, it is just kind of a mess there. The Steelers obviously won that. I know, Joey, you were thinking they weren't going to be a playoff team. I just don't see how they aren't a playoff team with their schedule. But Chase, if you look at the box score, seemed like he had an okay game, 4 for 81. If you watch the game, there were two of those 4 catches were off a tip passes by the defender that like he just made a crazy play and somehow caught. And you're just like, how is this happening? But get one of those in a game is crazy. He had 2 of that, so that was like half his yardage. So you got to be worried if you're relying on Chase for your playoff run right now.
Yeah, I mean, really any Bengal, I mean, no Joe Burrow, that team's obviously going to take a massive hit. So you probably don't want to be relying anyone on that team for the fantasy playoffs.
Even the rush game was abysmal, which was pretty crazy. I think Joe Mixon, had like less than 25 yards on the ground, which is crazy.
Pittsburgh is good though. Division game. I think that there's the possibility that they could do something. I don't know what their schedule's like down the stretch, but ideally, we kind of had like a feeling it wasn't going to be the best for Jake Browning going against Pittsburgh in his first start.
Yeah, but someone coming back in their first start in a while that had a great day is Joey's man. I'll let you take it away. It was Kyren Williams.
Yeah, Kyren Williams looked absolutely incredible. He had 143 yards on the ground. He had how many yards receiving? 60-something yards receiving, over 200 yards from scrimmage for the game.
2 touchdowns. Yeah.
So, 2 touchdowns. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he was incredible, and my expectations were low because a lot of times you see these guys come back and from injury in like the first game. It's like we probably should have read the tea leaves when they cut Darrell Henderson.
Yeah.
Or they even saw Kyren Williams take a snap, that they felt pretty good about how he was looking.
They took his time with him too because they had the bye. So like I think he had like an extra week or 2 to get back. So he was clearly healthy.
Yeah, he's awesome, and the offense fits him perfectly. And as the season has progressed, early in the season, I thought it was going to be more of like a flash in the pan type of situation. But as the season progresses, I'm more and more confident that this might be something that he can replicate or carry into next year. Yeah,
I mean, obviously, I've been a major skeptic, and after this game, I don't think they're moving away from him after this season, personally. I've never thought he was looked that good on the field. He looked fast. The Cards D sucks, so maybe it was just their slow defenders, but he was just like blown past defenders. So I was like, I don't remember Kyren being able to do this. And it helped Stafford, who's like, if you're going to the playoffs, Stafford's like was a cheap quarterback. He threw for 4 touchdowns, 2 to Kyren and 2 to who? Tyler Higbee, who hadn't had a touchdown all season. So if you're a Puka or a Cooper Kupp owner, you were very disappointed in what was a plus matchup.
Yeah, the Cooper Kupp situation is
headache.
It doesn't look like a great one.
No.
Every single time he gets tackled, he's like he stays down. It's tough.
Yeah, and then on the other side, I mean, Kyler looked okay. He had a rushing touchdown. Hollywood started to get the target share, and Trey McBride is easily the most reliable, I think, option in Arizona, and looking like an upper half tight end 1 right now, because someone who's going to get the work, get enough catches, and has the upside of a touchdown every single week. So that's exciting to see that's continuing each single week here.
Arizona as a team, I think, looks good. I'm happy to what I see from Kyler. I think they currently have the number 2 pick. So if number 1 ends up being a quarterback in some capacity, either the Bears trade to somebody else or the Bears decide to take a quarterback, and the Cardinals end up potentially with Marvin Harrison Jr., maybe they decide to just stick it out with Kyler and add Marvin Harrison, I think that would be pretty awesome. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, definitely looks good there, but doesn't look as good as what's going in Dallas. I think I know Matt pre-show we were talking about looking for Dak in the DK lineup wasn't an option there, but he's going to win people leagues this year, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, especially in our Albany league, Ryan the Dak trade, huh?
Yeah, he's coming out like a bandit in that.
Dak trade worked out for sure. Yeah, I mean he's looked unbelievable, throwing 4 touchdowns like multiple times in the last couple of weeks.
2 picks, 18 touchdowns and 2 picks in the last something like 5 or 6 games. It's like something ridiculous.
And his schedule doesn't get hard ever the rest of the year. He's got Seattle this week, horrible defense. He's got Philly, horrible secondary, and he's got Buffalo. We saw that just get lit up by Hurts. You got Miami, who obviously gets lit up and has a ton of points there, especially if it's a good team. Then you get the Lions, who have a horrible secondary. They got lit up by Jordan Love. And then even to close out the year in Week 18, where we're not playing, it's the Commanders, who's stinky defense. Like, it's going to be insane at the end of the year. He might be the QB1 to close out the season.
To be fair, the Dolphins did just shut out the Jets, but,
Yes. Well, Tim Boyle, I think, did throw a touchdown on him. So if you're going to let Tim Boyle throw a TD on you, maybe
be the wrong way as well. So
that's true. But do you know how many games Zach Wilson did not throw a touchdown? And you have arguably a worse quarterback throwing one against you, which I guess, I mean, talk about that game. Even if you own Breece Hall, I don't know how you're feeling right now because, like, on the ground, he hasn't eclipsed over 50 yards. I think he had 51 time, but he hasn't gone over 50 yards since week 5 on the ground. He's getting a lot of work in the passing game, which is propping up his value, but it is just rough having any pieces of that offense in your team where you had such high hopes. I mean, we mentioned Rodgers is coming back. Who knows if that's going to save you at all, but it's rough there. And obviously, when you playing against the Dolphins, like I just always want to say this every single week with Tyreek, he has at least one play where he's like does something that no one else can do, and he's the most consistently unstoppable player I think I've ever seen. The guy is just insane, which is not fair. Even though the Jets defense is good, he still just got his.
Yeah, I mean, Tyreek's pretty expensive on DK this week, and
worth it.
That's all.
Foreshadowing, yeah. Speaking of foreshadowing the DK lineup, Dave, I want to get a temperature check from you real quick on the Commanders. You talked about that Dallas game, and the offense has looked funky, if you will, for lack of a better word, the last 2 weeks. Last 2 weeks ago against the Giants, I don't know if that's just a thing where they just don't play well against the Giants. And then last week in Dallas, that's probably what we're going to chalk it up to. But Sam Howell, confidence level, still high?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about Sam Howell at all. The Giants, because like this happened early in the year. That was one of the other wins that the Giants had. And I think Matt started. The Giants just seemed to have their number. Like Howell was coming in blazing, played the Giants and put up a stinker. And then after that was amazing. Then gets to the Giants and put up a stinker. I think it's just the defensive scheme somehow gets to Howell and he can't figure it out. And then the Cowboys have one of the best defenses in the entire league. They're arguably like top 3, if not the best defense. And I mean, they have one guy who I think broke the record for pick sixes in a season. I think he has like 6, which is crazy. But he still threw for 300 yards. And he didn't throw for a touchdown. He did throw 1 pick, but he rushed one in. So I'm not overly concerned. It is a weird offense picking your shot from like a pass catcher option because they just spread the ball so much. Like Curtis Samuel was the lead this time. And I mean, Dotson and Terry McLaurin were still okay, but yeah, it's pretty crazy that he can. And I'm impressed from a quarterback perspective because he's not just like honing in on one player. He's like actually reading the field and picking the open guy. Yeah, I mean, I like Howell. I'm not worried about him. I think he's going to be great. But as a owner of any of the pass catchers, like there's a lot of upside, but the floor is low. Yeah, no consistency there. But I still believe in it. I don't know if you guys agree, or if I just have rose-colored lenses that I'm looking at him through.
I think it's going to depend on the coaching staff next year, right? I mean, I don't think Bieniemy's really helped himself by leaving Kansas City to try to get a head coaching job. And I think Rivera's gone. I mean, they're probably going to do an overhaul of the whole front office and everything. And you never know, a new coach, they could be like, all right, let's go trade up and get a quarterback. And Sam Howell could be looking for a job. And I'm sure he will get a job. I mean, if Desmond Ritter's a quarterback.
Goddamn right.
Yeah.
Tim Boyle's a quarterback. I'm just saying, Howell could definitely get a job somewhere.
I don't think they'd move away from Howie yet. I think the coaching staff would still give him a chance because he's done great this year. He's still young. He's on a rookie contract, so like that's the other thing. Like he hasn't played bad enough where you'd be concerned about his play yet, and he's cheap. I think if he was bad next year with the new coaching staff, then yes, he would be out the door potentially. But
Hey, we get it. You love him.
I love him. I mean, I was made. He's basically a rookie. Like, imagine if you drafted a rookie playing like Sam Howell, you'd be so pumped. He played one game last year.
On Sam Howell. I mean, geez.
Dude, if you were looking at mock drafts going into 2 seasons ago, like people were thinking he was going to be a first rounder potentially. He slipped very far. I don't really understand it, but he looks great in my opinion. I don't know, but.
Why don't we talk about a rookie QB that actually looks great? DeVito.
DeVito, he's winning games. I wish he wouldn't, but he is.
Yeah, just won 2 in a row.
Family at the tailgate. That was pretty awesome.
I know. I love the family stuff. But yeah, I feel like that's the only game we haven't talked about. Obviously, probably because it was such a bad game. But
there's not a lot of fantasy goodness to be had there.
Yeah, unless you're looking for guys that may be losing their jobs soon. But yeah, Giants win 2 in a row. You got to be pumped, Dave.
I mean, it's a fun story. It's just that it's so hard to get a top pick as a Giant fan. But whatever. I mean, technically, I guess they're in the playoff hunt. I don't know. In that game, really, the only thing to take away, in my opinion, is the running backs from Andre and Zeke are the only potentially valuable options in New England. And Hyatt, which, for again, someone who I may be talking about later, showing some flashes there. And I'm pretty excited about what I'm seeing out of there. But other than that, it's just like, why now? Why? Like, I just started looking at like Caleb versus Drake May, and they start winning immediately. I'm like, did I do this? Did I jinx my team? So I don't know. Don't love it.
I think personally that these other organizations are a little bit better at tactfully losing than the Giants. Like, I just think, I think
like
that
the other side of the field.
I was gonna say, Belichick definitely said, "You better not hit this kick."
Yeah,
rub some baby oil on that football before
they would just move the ball into Giants territory, and then Mac Jones would throw the most horrendous, disgusting interception, like getting a little bit of pressure, like just throws it directly to a Giants DB, and I'm just like, it just. As he's coming out for that kick, it's like this random schmuck that I've never heard of before. I'm like, there's no possible way this guy's hitting this kick, and yanks it 6 feet to the left. I don't know. You can't convince me that the Patriots were trying to win that game. They're too savvy of an organization. Like, I'm sure Kraft was telling Belichick one way or another, I've done a lot for you. You better lose every single game. Look as good as you can for the first 45 minutes, but lose.
And just to close out the last 2 games that were the primetime games, the Chargers, they can't win. Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen are doing everything they can, literally everything. Keenan Allen had 14 receptions for 106, and it's not enough. But the Ravens look great, but that's not translating to success always for Lamar Jackson there, who's putting up kind of average games. But this time we actually did see a big showing from Flowers. Zay Flowers there. He took an unnecessary touchdown to the house for 37 yards to close the game. It's like, just go down and the game's over. But, the rookie wanted his stats there. But wanted to get your thoughts on the Chargers offense overall. How do you feel about Lamar maybe? And Eckler, who doesn't really look that strong in the past couple of games. And I'm feeling like that cliff might be coming.
Yeah, I feel like we talked about the Chargers a little bit on the last podcast, Dave, and how Herbert's having a great season. I think he was QB3 when we looked at it last week, and it's just not translating to real wins for them, which is kind of crazy. But
very Bills-esque.
Yeah, honestly, they're kind of having a Bills type season where from a fantasy perspective, they've been great if you have the studs there, but from a real life perspective, they're just not winning games.
Yeah, if you have Keenan, you love the volume, but it's tough if you're a fan for the Chargers. And just to close out the section, just because we have to talk about it, guys, even if it hurts us. The Monday Night Football game was gross. It was very, very, very gross. Somehow the Bears won, didn't score a touchdown. But Fields had a couple moments, but he had 2 bad fumbles, and then also looked lost at other times. DJ Moore somehow still had 11 for 114 yards or something like that. It was a crazy stat. And Cole Kmet looked all right, but I don't know what your guys' feeling on Fields is moving forward. And then Dobbs had easily the worst game after what's been a storybook season so far for him. He had 4 interceptions, but still almost won the game. But what was your guys' takeaways from one of the worst Monday Night Football games I've seen in a while?
A couple of those interceptions from Dobbs were tipped. I think actually 2 of them. I mean, granted, there was one where he put it on Jordan Addison's face right as he was breaking in on a route, and it's just probably had too much zip on it, but I'm willing to let it slide. Me personally, with Josh Dobbs, I'd be rolling him right back out there if I had him as quarterback on my team. It was a disgusting game. I'm interested to see what Chicago does with Justin Fields too, to be totally honest, because he looks functional. They could trade him for, they could trade him for quite a ransom, if you ask me. One of these quarterback needy teams, maybe even Carolina. Well, maybe not Carolina.
Not Carolina.
Yeah. One of these quarterback needy teams is going to go out there and give him a lot of money if he becomes available. Imagine him on Pittsburgh or something. Pittsburgh would be in contention for the number 1 seed in the AFC if they had somebody as competent as Justin Fields playing quarterback for them. So,
what about Atlanta? I think he's from Atlanta.
I would like Atlanta. That would be nice too.
Run first team.
Yeah,
that's what he does.
Yeah. So he's going to be great for someone. He's going to be great for fantasy for someone.
Yes.
Hopefully he's great in actual football too. But for fantasy, the production is guaranteed. It's the same thing with Kyler Murray, right? I don't think either of them are winning a Super Bowl, but they'll be solid fantasy performers.
Yeah, I feel like I've talked about Fields a lot. I've kind of been down on him. Obviously, from a fantasy perspective, he's a good quarterback to have, but I don't know. If I was the Bears, I almost would do what Joe's saying, trade him away for a ton right now while you can and kind of go from there. And then on the other side of the ball, Dobbs, storybook story, had 1 bad game. Hopefully he bounces back and still gets to finish out the season. But regardless, I think he's played himself into some type of playing time next year somewhere, even if it's not on the Vikings.
Nice. Well, with that, we're going to move into our next section. So, as I mentioned, our trade deadline actually passed in our Dynasty league. And with that, we kind of want to do a post-mortem on some of the trades that we actually saw go down in our league and kind of, now that we have some hindsight, see which trades we really liked during the year, what players that maybe we thought now looking back look like they're steals because their value has appreciated, or players that people targeted that have kind of flopped. Because this is what you're doing when you're doing making trades. You're kind of calling your shot. You're hoping to get in on a player and seeing them ascend. And doesn't always work out. We've all made good trades. We've all made bad trades. So we're just going to go through, kind of talk it through. But with that being said, I'm going to toss it over to you, Rye, first. What was your favorite trade of this past season?
Yeah, so I went with the trade between Harrison and Dan and Scott Rapizzotti. At the time, I thought it was a very fair trade. They traded Bryce Hall and 2024 third-round pick for Geno Smith, Keenan Allen, and a 2024 second-round pick. And I thought it was a good move. Scott, kind of a huge win-now piece with Keenan Allen, although it doesn't look like it's going to pay off. Scott's kind of on the verge of missing the playoffs, but had he made the playoffs, it would have been a huge move. And then Harrison and Dan got a valuable Dynasty RB for next year, knowing they were already done this year and You mentioned it a little bit earlier. Hall hasn't looked great, but I think the Jets overall have just looked terrible. So I think it's more of a team thing than really a Hall thing. So I think he'll bounce back at some point and be a valuable running back going forward. So I thought it was a pretty fair trade. I liked it for both teams. And who knows, maybe it still works out for Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I love Brees. I'm not worried about Brees. I think he's still a top 5 dynasty running back. And the fact that he got a second-round pick, which should be a pretty early pick, I think is also a pretty good asset for him to get back, since I don't think he has any first. So that was a nice get for him. But got to appreciate it when players in our league go for it. But that was a good match of someone who's given up this year and someone else who's trying to still win it, even though it didn't pay off. What about Maddie, our guest here today? What was your favorite trade?
So mine was between the Wilkes and Joey. It was Mike Evans and Romeo Dobbs for Croak Dog's first round pick. I mean, I think this is similar to like what Ryan did. It said with the Scotch trade, it's just a team that's trying to get assets to try and win a championship. You know, Mike Evans, I mean, was he going for his 10th consecutive year of over 1,000 yards? I think he's at like 860 or something like that. And I mean, what do you have? 2 touchdowns last week. Also, it's going towards Ryan's almost 200 points for the week.
Almost.
Dobbs is
So close.
Yeah, so close. Romeo Dobbs is a nice young player. I mean, I feel like he's got a little boomer bust in him a little bit. You know, maybe consistency issues. But I mean, he still puts up decent points, especially like in a week where you got like a bye apocalypse like we got this week. I mean, he's just an easily plug-in guy. I mean, Joey gets the draft capital he needs. I mean, it was the right move. Evans, a older player, and you know, he had to sweeten it a little bit with a younger player like Dobbs. But I mean, you end up getting a first round pick out of it. And you know, Crope is one of those teams that's like on the fringe of making the playoffs, and maybe he won't make the playoffs. I mean, that first round pick could be either bottom 6 or top 6. I mean, it's kind of like right there. And I know Joey, I think in 2 pods ago, was rooting for everyone to be. By the way, you're welcome. Yeah, I mean, to me, that was my favorite trade, and I mean, it was one that made sense for both sides altogether.
Yeah, and I'll jump in because Joey made 2 back-to-back trades, and I'll let you, Joe, discuss a little bit more because you did these in tandem, and I think it was a great move overall. I think there was 30 minutes or less that occurred between them. But you also traded, Joey. You acquired Michael Pittman in 2024 fourth, and you traded with Mike Caffer, Mike Williams. You traded away Jacoby Myers, Russell Wilson, and the 2024 third. And again, this is what I love in dynasty trades like this, where you see one team that is more going for the rebuild and another team that is going for it this year and needs assets, and they needed a quarterback bad. So Russell Wilson was a clear need there. And Michael Pittman, to me, was a great target for really any team, but especially one that is looking to rebuild, because I think he is a top 15 wide receiver. And the past couple weeks, you start seeing the upside out of that, especially this past week. He's getting a ton of work there. He looks great. He potentially even becoming a wide receiver 1 overall in Dynasty. So I thought it was a great trade. The picks, just to even it out, you throw in later picks, it doesn't really matter at that point, but it just makes people feel better about the trade overall. And Jacoby Myers did step up this week, so there is potential that he could help the Mikes get through in the playoff rounds. But I think it was a savvy move for both teams, but I love, especially when you put the 2 trades in tandem for Joe. I like we did.
Yeah, it's kind of worked out, right? Where you see Pittman. I mean, Pittman's had a strong season most of the way, but Russ has really put it together. I mean, obviously the team's on a 5 or 6 game winning streak. They're probably the hottest team in the league, and he's been playing really well. He's not throwing interceptions, so it seems like he's kind of settled into the offense, and he's on that long contract. There were a little bit of concerns early in the year, will he get benched? What's going to happen? Is Sean Payton going to end up? But at this point, you kind of feel pretty good about Russ. He'll probably be, at least from with how he's playing right now, you feel pretty confident in his outlook. And yeah, I mean, for me, it was let's just try and capitalize on some of Jacoby Myers, who I thought was maybe a little bit of a sell high, although he's still putting up big weeks like he did this week. Try and get somebody who is young and with a little more future future upside. And similar to Russ, Mike Evans Mike Evans, again, has looked pretty good all season, but past couple weeks, he's really been getting it done for.
Yeah, he's been on fire.
And it's funny, we talk about Crope Dog's pick. I just realized as I was kind of like evaluating the standings either today or last night, my team had like an unusually strong week and beat Schluter, right? Yep. Knocked Schluter back to 6-6, which in retrospect kind of sucks because if I had lost, right, like Schluter goes to 7-5, and he's another person who's in contention to potentially hold Crope out of the playoffs, right? Crope's at 7-5. Mm-hmm. If Scott had won last week, he would have been 6-6. If I had thrown the match to Schluter, he would have been 7-5. You never really want to like just do a little bit of a tank ski against somebody who's in your division, but yeah, I was just like, God, if only I had just lost. If only I had just lost to Schluter, the likelihood that Crope would have been in the bottom 6 would have been at least some percentage points higher right now. But we'll see what happens the next 2 weeks. I think you play Crope this week. So
I do, but I don't have a full lineup, which I'm not feeling great about because he's got Tyreek going against the Commanders, which is terrifying.
A little banged up. We'll see. Maybe you won't play.
Oh, yeah, maybe. I need HN to come back. I have no Hawkinson, so I think I'm rolling out Chig. We'll see. But I don't love the options I got this week. But yeah, no, I mean, the other thing about your team too, it's funny because you made some of these trades, and as we mentioned, Bajan's coming. Your team is actually scary now going to, like, you almost beat me last week, and you didn't have Bajan or Pittman, which I was like, this is very serendipitous here. So your division, even though you got a low record, the trades you've made are win for the future, but they certainly help you this year too. So it's going to be a battle. But Joe, what was your favorite trade?
Yeah, so for me, I think the most interesting trade was probably the two Chris Olave moves that took place in a span of 7 or 8 days. I think this is interesting mostly because, you don't really see top wide receivers get traded frequently in Dynasty at all, right? Just because they're such high value assets. But Olave managed to get traded twice in 7 days, and first got acquired by Team Clark, along with a first round pick for Diggs, Pierce, and Rashee Rice. So, I mean, honestly, like looking at that trade, I mean, obviously now we can look back with a little bit of retrospect, and we know that Rashee Rice has blossomed a bit since then. Damian Pierce hasn't been so great, and even Diggs probably was better in the first half of the season than he has been the last couple of weeks. But I look at that trade as a huge win. That initial trade is a huge win for Team Clark, right? To acquire Chris Olave and a first for, obviously Diggs. Diggs is great, but he's on the older side, right? You don't even know if he's going to be in Buffalo next year. So I like that. I thought it was kind of a steal for him, but then ended up trading him a week later to Dave. Fucking Dave, just like,
that's right, baby,
hoodwinked him. No, traded to Dave for a couple of more solid depth pieces. I think, and J.K. Dobbins' corpse, which we've talked about a couple times.
They added that in. I didn't even offer that.
They were like, "Get this guy off it."
They wanted. I was like, "Oh, sure, take him."
But if you put these two pieces together, then it ends up being Diggs, Pierce, Rice, and 2 firsts. Oh, sorry, for 2 firsts, Lockett and Judy. Right, I'm not even going to include J.K. Dobbins in the spoils because
no respect.
May as well just drop him right now. Diggs, Pierce, and Rice for 2 firsts, Lockett and Judy, which is still good, right? Like that's still like a good outcome, I think, for Team Clark. I don't think it's as good as if they had just kept Olave, but still, right? Like, I think net, those are 2 interesting trades and involves 3 teams. And I do think the second trade where you grabbed Olave was a good buy low on a really valuable asset. Chris Olave had a couple tough weeks in the middle of the season where Derek Carr looked terrible, and you just kind of like there was a little bit of the public opinion was swaying a bit, and I feel like you kind of capitalized there. But yeah, those super interesting trades. I thought they were all pretty fair, and those are the kind of blockbusters that you like to see. So
yeah, there was definitely fireworks, and on the Olave, I think I was texting you on the side like right after it. I was like getting very antsy. I was trying to get Olave from Schluter, it wasn't happening, and then when it went to Clark, I was like, all right. New blood has no idea of how hard I've been trying to get Olave with it, and he had another bad week. And I was actually playing the Clark Sauce that week, so I was like, I don't want to play against Olave because I think he's going to blow up. But also, I was like, this is in my opinion, like the last chance to maybe get Olave because, as you mentioned, these type of players are not usually available, and I think this is like the most attainable he'll ever be. So. I went hard. I was like, we got to make this work. I got to get this guy.
Yeah. Good moves. Very good moves.
Yeah. Moving on, though, but as we mentioned, and we kind of talked about some of this, is just some of these players that are appreciating in value since the trades. And I know we were talking about Olave, so I'm going to lead this over to you, Matt. But, like, what are some players that you think since the trade have kind of rose in value?
So mine actually was. I mean, originally I had Josh Dobbs, and after Monday night's game, I kind of switched that to Chris Olave.
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at Olave, I mean, it's crazy. Like last year, he probably should have been Rookie of the Year, right? Had he not gotten all the injuries. And then he gets Derek Carr compared to Andy Dalton. Who would have thought Andy Dalton would have been a better quarterback for Chris Olave than Derek Carr? But it seems like Jameis Winston now has shown the blueprint what to do with Olave. Throw it in his area, in the area that he is, and Chris Olave will make a play on the ball. And Derek Carr obviously does the same thing and gets him a concussion because he throws the ball drastically.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the last 2 weeks, I mean, he had 18.4 points. Then last week he had 14.9 points. And I'm pretty sure he exited pretty early, right, with the concussion?
Yeah, he had a huge first half. He had like almost 100 yards in the first half, I think.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, or it was like the early second half. I mean, he literally still had half a game left, and he was over 100 yards. And then if he can play this week, I mean, he plays Detroit, which is not a great defense. And that's probably going to be one of those games where it's going to be could be a shootout, right?
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it's Carolina. So, I mean, you're looking at the last two weeks of the regular season division matchups of Chris Olave, if he can play. I mean, if he can, it is what it is. But if he can, I mean, you're looking at two pretty juicy matchups for Chris Olave. And, I mean, the overall trade when you got him, I mean, Lockett and Judy. I mean, Judy, who knows? Lockett's getting old. JK, no legs, like you guys were saying, and really
is he going to play, JK?
Yeah. No, he's working out with Aaron Rodgers, so who knows? He might be back by week 17. But you really got him for a 2020. You really got Olave for a 2024 first and second rounder. I mean, if you really think about where you're picking, I mean, you're number one in the league. I mean, you could potentially have a bye. So right off the bat, you're talking about your first round pick would be a bottom 4 pick, right? I mean, if you said to anyone, "Oh, well, I'm going to pick at number 8," it's like that would be the best case scenario, right? And you'd be like, "I'm going to get a Chris Olave at number 8." I mean, you would take that any day of the week, right? And
big time.
Really, that's the way I looked at it. It was a first and second. The second was kind of almost a sweetener at the time because, I mean, Olave was not playing well. And I actually was shocked when Schluter traded him because we tried to get him for a while. And, like, you know, it was back and forth. But he seemed pretty adamant that he wasn't going to trade him. I mean, the trade he got for him, I mean, I get it. He likes Rashid Rice. I mean, it was a good trade. And I was just like, wow, he actually traded him. And then a week later, I was like, damn, who would have thought Chris Olave would have been traded twice in like a week? It was pretty wild. But, I mean, for me, he's like the guy on the rise right now. And especially with a juicy matchup. I mean, he could win you the division if he plays, like I said.
I need him to, so let's hope so. But yeah.
Well, I mean, your points against is going to probably be
That's right. My team plays great D.
Right.
But
points against, those are your two top assets, right?
Yeah, exactly. Points against. Everyone should do as well with points against as I do. It's everyone else's fault, not me. But Joe, what about you? What player did you think was on the rise that's been traded?
Yeah, it's still probably it's still probably Josh Dobbs for me. I just think that he's been pretty functional all year. And I think he's done enough where even if Minnesota moves on, he probably finds an opportunity with another team. He's been rushing. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. Had 2 rushing touchdowns already for Minnesota. And I think he got him. I think he was acquired for a 2026 third. Right? It was really
second. But when that went down, I didn't realize it was 2026 until like a week later, and that trade just still makes me laugh because like it just points out how wrong you could be on like the initial trade. And like I was like, what are you trading for Dobbs on? The guy's not going to play anymore, and lo and behold, he gets traded and was doing great again. So what a trade!
Exactly why we traded him. We were like, Tyler's coming back. The Cardinals said we're not trading him, and Dan and I were like, well, we'll get anything for him, and even if it's a 2026 second, like whatever, we'll throw it out there. It's Scott, and again, Scott needed a quarterback, and with Tannehill early in the season, we were like, all right, you want another quarterback? Here you go. And
I'll tell you what, at the end, like the middle to the end of next season, you're going to be like, oh yeah, we got a nice extra second round.
Yeah, send that out for some stuff.
So see what it turns into.
I mean, at the time, it definitely made sense, and that's why we're talking about him here, because his value has just risen so much since the trade happened, and he's a starting quarterback now. Could potentially, be a starting quarterback somewhere next year. So kind of crazy how it worked out.
It looked like a 1 week fill-in that now has multiple weeks fill-in, which crazy, but that's dynasty for you. But right, Alex, what about you? What player is on the rise that you saw was traded?
I had him as well, and then the other guy I had, Dave, I know you're going to talk about. I'll just mention him quick, but we talked about Rashee Rice already. Just had a huge game, looking like he could probably be that wide receiver 1 in Kansas City now. So, at the time he was traded, I think he was more of like a throw-in, but now it's looking like he might actually be one of the more valuable assets in that whole trade.
Yeah, I agree. I think he might be the highlight for Schluter in that trade now, because he looked great. He's looked explosive. He has flashed, and after this week, I think he had double-digit targets for the first time this season, and someone needs to take over as wide receiver 1 on that team. Like just anyone, please, anyone, someone do it. And Rashee Rice looks like the best option there. So like to get him in as a throw-in, like you traded away a top wide receiver, but Schluter's going for it this year. So I get the trade, and I think it was a fair trade at the time. But getting Rashee Rice has really made it look like a much stronger haul for Schluter there. So I've been high on him. I tried to also peek at him a little bit post that trade as well to get Rice, but he was high on Rice from the start. So that wasn't going to happen. But I thought that was a great nab. But there's a few steals there, but there's a lot more flops because, you take a shot. Not everything pays out there. So talk about some of the players that maybe didn't pan out well. And Ryan, I'll let you start off because you got a couple funny ones.
Yeah, the one I just have to mention is Zach Wilson, just because he was
the timing could have been better.
Yeah, the timing again. He was traded and then literally benched within, I think it was like a day or two, of the trade happening.
I think the trade happened like Sunday morning, and he was benched like midday.
Yeah, so just real unfortunate timing there, but it was only a 3rd-round pick, so hopefully he didn't end up giving too much, but he'd be untradeable right now. So great timing of that trade. And then another one that Schluter's involved in, we traded with him preseason, Madison and Stevenson. Coincidentally, they were both in that same trade, but at the time you thought you were getting a solid starting RB with at least some like top 15 upside from either one. Both have underperformed drastically. Madison's the RB 28 and had tons of fumble problems, and Ty Chandler is almost taking over there now, and Stevenson has looked better, but the Patriots have been just such a mess that his value has been really hurt. And I know earlier in the season we even gave him the "he's not that guy" award. So, just has been a bad trade for both sides, really, which I guess makes it a fair trade. But neither guy has really performed.
There's one other player in that trade that looked pretty bad as well. think it was Jameson Williams.
Jameson Williams, he's still got some value though. He's had some touchdowns and some catches.
Some is a good word for that. But no, that trade was just sneaky from the start. But Jameson probably has the most upside. Ramondre is looking like he may be bounced back second half. But another player who kind of has the same arc as that, I think, is the one Joe's going to talk about.
Yeah, Tony Pollard was the first one that came to mind, but you can't even really say Tony Pollard right now though, because the last 2 weeks he's kind of coming back into form, and the timing couldn't be better for you guys, Matt, as you're heading into playoffs, right? So I get the feeling, and we talked earlier about Dallas's schedule being softish coming down the stretch. Obviously, Dak is throwing the ball very, very well, and that's probably contributed to the fact that Pollard doesn't have as many rushing touchdowns this year as he had last year. But the yards per carry have improved the last 2 weeks, and he looked like he had more juice on Thanksgiving. So you can't really say Pollard. If I had to throw out an honorable mention, Amari Cooper, the Amari Cooper Baker Mayfield trade.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like a little bit of a poopy trade on both sides. Baker, I think, has been a little bit better. Cooper has had his struggles, obviously, with Watson's injury being a major factor there.
Injuries, he's just always.
And I mean, now he's banged up on top of the fact that the quarterback situation there continues to be a carousel. So I'd say Amari Cooper is definitely an honorable mention, just for a guy that looked like he was going to be promising early in the season and then just really has kind of fallen off.
Yeah. And what about Matt? You have another running back that was burning bright early in the season, but post-trade, not looking great.
I mean, to be fair, he was declining prior to the trade, but Kenneth Walker, I mean, last 4 weeks, 2.2 points. Then he had 21.2 points, but so I think he took like one reception, 64 yards to the house, which day, right? 2.1 points, did not play. Doesn't look like he's playing this week, and if he does, it's Dallas. And then if he plays next week, it's San Francisco. I mean, on top of that, I mean, it's like the Rashad Penny and trying to think who was the running back then who like
Chris Carson,
right? It's like the same situation, right? It's like deja vu all over again. Charbonnet, all of a sudden, they just decide like, oh, we're just going to give you all the touches. I mean, Charbonnet is out touching, even when Walker was healthy, was out touching him. It was all of a sudden like Pete Carroll just kind of gets bored. It's like, all right, it's like the Super Bowl all over again. No, don't give it to Marshawn. Let's throw it to like the cornerback. Like, it's crazy. I think sometimes Pete Carroll just can't help himself, and he just likes to add chaos and fuel to the fire, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's weird because, like, you thought at the beginning of the season, because I was down on him because I was like, oh, they got Charbonnet, it's the whole thing. In the beginning of the season, he was on fire.
Yeah.
He's running back in the league. And all of a sudden, it's just like, I mean, you talk about a cliff. I mean, like, he just fell. I mean, it was like ran into a wall. It wasn't even gradual. I feel like it was just, he ran into a wall, fell off the cliff, and
hurt his oblique in that wall.
Yeah. It's like an afterthought in Seattle at this point. I mean, who knows? You might not even come back. I mean, the way they're going, Seattle, I mean, and they clearly like Charbonnet. So, I mean, to me, I forgot what it was. I know it was like mac sauce to Crope Dog. I don't even remember what was given up, but
it was a large deal. But yeah, there's a lot of players in there. But to your point too, it's like, and we talked about this a few weeks ago too. If Walker got hurt and Charbonnet starts getting all the work, there's already like a changing in the snap count. It's hard to see that Walker's ever going to get a full workload again unless Charbonnet gets hurt. So, like, an injury to Walker kind of hurts his future outlook going forward because he was dominating when he got all the work, and that doesn't seem like a reality that can happen anymore. So you're going to need him to break off that one big run to have a good week, which is going to mean you're going to have a lot of disappointed weeks going forward as well.
And you would think, like, Charbonnet hasn't even played that well, even though he's given the opportunity to be like, oh, Kenneth Walker will get the carries again. I don't think he's going to get the carries. I think they're kind of just like, oh, let's just feed the rookie. Eventually he's going to break one.
Charbonnet's also had like the worst matchups, which just stinks. You're like, you finally got your chance. And it's like 3 brutal matchups in a row.
Yeah,
true.
But we'll see. But a couple other ones just to mention quickly. Quentin Johnson, not a big name, but that was a part of a trade. And I know that's like an upside shot to try to get a rookie wide receiver mixed into the deal. He doesn't look like he has it. Obviously, who knows moving forward, but so far he's been pretty bad. Like I'd put him probably outside even the top 10 rookie wide receivers, top 15 maybe. He's just been brutal. Damian Pierce, we kind of alluded to, he was traded again. He was part of a larger deal, but he looks like he may be out of a job coming into next season or two because he has low draft capital and not looking good in that Texans offense where everything else is clicking. An honorable mention or dishonorable was just the Kirk Cousins. It was a great trade at the time, and then you can't predict an injury like that. And it was literally it wasn't a full game. Like the trade happened right before that injury. So that just stinks, but that's part of the game. So sometimes the flops are injuries, sometimes the flops are players just losing their roles. So we'll see what happens. But with that,
one note, real quick on that trade. I think I might still have Scott winning that trade. Like if we look at like revisionist history, like if we just look at where we are now, it was Kirk Cousins and a second. He acquired a 2024 second for James Conner, who are we sure James Conner has much left in the tank? He hasn't been very good.
He has not. No.
Right. Quentin Johnston, we just talked about how he was trending to be more like a bust than a valuable asset, and a 2025 first, right? So like if Cousins ends up in a decent spot, like you have a quarterback next year, you have a second rounder next year, you only gave up a future first. I think it's looking okay given that Connor and Johnson are not looking as promising as they did when the trade was made. Yeah.
And that's a good point. I wasn't I still think, to your point, the trade will still be good. I was more of a flop for the point of the trade was to compete this year. Yeah. But you're all right, especially when you think about what first he gave up, with it being a 2025 first, not a 2024. Because if Cousins comes back with all the other players in his roster, that could be a late pick. So, but he does get in a 2024 second as well. So he can bolster his team up to make – because when you give away a first or any of your picks, you are like, I want to make that as least valuable as possible. So you're like, now you have the chance to do that.
And he's still in on Cousins. I was trying to acquire Cousins from him at the deadline for my next year team, and he was like, "No, I think I'm going to write it out with Cousins."
Yeah, it's not a bad call.
Paid a lot for him, so
they want him back.
Yeah, you got it at this point.
Good for next year. I mean, it's a veteran-heavy team. I mean, if you think about it, you just said the 2025 pick. I mean, he has a lot of good players. I mean, he has a very small window for those players, but I mean.
He's got another year at least, so
next year,
zero quarterbacks. He might actually have to think about which quarterback he wants to start next year, which is pretty wild. Right?
Imagine, man, crazy.
About Tannehill, but I mean, like if you think about Dobbs, Cousins, and I mean, he's got a decent team, and his wide receivers are good.
People are going to be coming to him for quarterbacks. It's crazy.
MC, I mean, like, and kudos to him. I mean, he just kept trading. He was not giving up.
Yeah.
That was the epitome of like. At one point, I was like, "All right, he's gonna like just start trading off assets, right?" And then he was like, "No, Kirk Cousins," and I was like, "Oh, okay, he's going for it." And then he gets Keenan Allen and Geno, and he beats us. Like that trade literally beat us that week, and I was like, "Damn, Scott's back in it."
I know. I really was trying to get Keenan as well. That was I wanted Keenan so bad. I love the fact that he kept going forward, and he had a lot of bad luck and still kept going forward too, and valiant effort. But with that, real quick, what is one sleeper you guys have going into the final weeks of the season who you think could pop and help players in the playoffs? Kind of like Jerick McKinnon did last year. Why don't you go, Matt, first, since you're the guest, give you the first one to pop in here.
Yeah, I mean, real quick, I had Jamison Williams. I mean, he's just like the ultimate boomer bust guy.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like Rashid Shaheed for our team. I mean, every week, the 3 weeks he went off, we didn't have him in the lineup, and you put him in the next week, and he gets like 2 points. Right? But I mean, the guy could literally take 2 catches and get you 20 points. Like, he's ultimate boom or bust. But then, honestly, like my big one was Isaiah Likely. I mean, he did it last year when Andrews was out, right? In a tight end premium league, I mean, he's worth a shot, and Lamar likes to throw the tight ends on his rollouts and stuff. So I mean, they're. I mean, again, like I guess you could say, like from the Ballers, they're nasty boys almost in a way.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, Jamison Williams, like I said, I mean, all you need is that 1 week. You just got to catch lightning in a bottle, which Ryan, I don't think you've done yet. But I mean,
funny enough.
I mean, again, like he's tight end premium, and he's now the starter, so it's worth a stone's throw, right? Especially if you're in desperation of a tight end.
Yeah, and we're actually starting Jameson this week because we have a couple buys, so we'll see. He'll probably be a massive bust this week, but
It's a solid 20 this week.
yeah, let's hope. But I actually really like the likely pick. I think that's a good one. I went with another tight end, real bottom of the barrel, but I went with Tucker Kraft just because Musgrave is on IR and top tight ends like Andrews are out for the fantasy playoffs, and we are a tight end premium league. So if you happen to have this guy and you were struggling at tight end, he caught a touchdown in week 12, almost had a touchdown in week 11. If nothing else, he has weekly touchdown potential, and the tight end position is pretty slim going into the playoffs. So he's someone that could potentially help you win.
Yeah, offense trending up too. They've been looking good. For mine, I threw an honorable mention to Trey McBride, although I don't necessarily know that he fits the criteria at this point.
He's too good already.
Yeah. But on the same offense, I like the idea of Michael Wilson, who has been out for the last 4 weeks with a shoulder injury. He's not practicing now. He's not likely to play this week. And then next week is their bye. So this is a weeks 15 through 17 speculative ad. If he's out there in a redraft, Dave appears to have him in this league for Dynasty or another. Yeah. He definitely flashed early in the season, had a 2-touchdown game with Josh Dobbs. Hasn't been out there with Kyler yet, but I don't know. Hollywood is not dominating that number one wide receiver role. Greg Dortch is still getting a lot of looks. Those looks are likely to go to Wilson once he's back. And yeah, I mean, if he produced a bunch with Dobbs, I feel like there's some upside there where he could potentially be somebody who comes out of nowhere to contribute to a winning team in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I've been wanting to start him every single week, and it's like, is he going to play? And he keeps getting ruled out. It's killing me. But a couple other quick ones. Jalen Hyatt, I kind of alluded to before. He's got all the speed in the world, and that's translating. He started in college, but he's getting open a lot on the field, and he was very close to having a couple breakout games earlier this year. He's had, I think, like 2 or 3 catches or like near catches where he just stepped out of bounds, but he was getting open, and you see that it's working downfield. And then this past week, he finally had his first 100-yard game. So they're on the bye this week, but I would also think with a team that is not the strongest record-wise, they'll probably try to get a bigger look out of their rookies. So I could see him getting a few more targets going into the end of the season. Jaden Reed, I want to throw out, I think personally he's my favorite Green Bay Packer wide receiver, and he's getting a lot of looks. He scored another touchdown this past week. And then as a veteran, Brandon Cooks, I think, is someone who people may have overlooked most of the year, but we've talked ad nauseum about the Cowboys playoff schedule or rest of season schedule. So I think Cooks is kind of ascending to the wide receiver 2 and getting a lot more targets and gets a lot of the deeper shots as well.
Yeah, I like him. I think Jaden Reed is probably sitting with Trey McBride, and most people are
already on to him.
Yeah.
I know.
But I completely agree. He's looked by far the best in their offense for a couple weeks now.
Yeah. Good. And then one quick update in our league. Even though this was our trade deadline, no trades. Very disappointing. But we did have a new weekly high and give an update on the weekly low. So the weekly low first was Clark Sauce with 82.34, but still beat not low enough for the Wilkinson brothers to get bested or worsted in that with only 2 weeks left. But to maybe offset that pain, the Wilkinson brothers did take the cake for the new weekly high on the year, just missing the 200-point mark. They were there, and there was a point correction, stat correction there. They had 199.46, so it can't even round up for 199.5. But that is a very, very respectable score there. So how do you feel about having the high score and the lowest score of any given week?
Totally redeemed ourselves, Dave. Totally redeemed ourselves. We're going for the Dynasty Triple Crown: lowest score, highest score, and championship. So
right.
we only have one left to get.
That legendary Triple Crown. But we'll see what happens. 2 weeks left. See if anyone can take either title away from you. But with that, we're going to get into our final segment, which is the DK lineup challenge, as we do with each special guest. So we're going to run through each of our lineups, put them in, and see if Maddie can take out all three of the podcasters in here. And I don't think we talked about, do we want to wager on this one again? We have in the past. What are you guys thinking here?
I could do 20 again.
Yeah, I think 20's been working.
All right, $20. Winner.
Are you in, Matt?
I'm in.
Nice.
Winner takes all. Let's go. Okay, so Maddie, jump to you first. What quarterback you going with, and what is their price?
So the quarterback was probably the toughest one for me. I think Joe, you alluded to it before the show. It was
Slim
tough.
pickings.
I ended up going with Brock Purdy against San Francisco. Against Philadelphia. And the reason I kind of went with that was just because of their secondary. That was the best I can give you, and it actually worked out that I could get a better receiver by doing it. So he only cost me $6,100. So that's really why I went with him.
I'll jump in because I also went with Brock Purdy for the same thing, and I saw the stat tweeted out by Kyle Bergoni earlier, I think yesterday. Opponents are throwing 68% of the time against Philadelphia, the highest rate in the NFL, and that is actually down from 70% before this past week. So wheels up for Purdy over here. He's going to be throwing a ton.
So I originally did have Purdy in my lineup. Ended up taking him out because I got gun shy because on the road, cold weather, and rain in the forecast. I was like, like that was what shied me away. But honestly, the matchup is perfect, and I got to say, if I didn't end up with the guy that I had, he was going to be my next best option.
Mm-hmm. Who'd you go with, though, Joe?
I ended up going with Sam Howell.
Yes, let's go.
I'm Howell this week, $6,200. I think that it's a good bounce back spot for him. He's had 2 rough weeks. He's at home. I think Miami's going to score 1 billion points against their terrible defense.
Yep.
So garbage time could come in. Hopefully another rushing touchdown. So we'll see. I think he bounces back.
I love it. What about you, Rye?
So I know it sounds like all three of you went with Tyreek, and for the same reason, I actually went with Tua. Commanders are the worst ranked defense against QBs and allow the second most yards to wide receivers. I'm hoping that translates to some big points for Tua. So
and can't get any pressure either, so it should be okay. That means Tyreek can run forever. But with that, Ryan, why don't you keep it going with your running backs? Well, actually, how much was Tua too before we move on?
He was 7,900.
79. Oh, a little bit pricier. Okay.
A little pricier. Running backs, I went with John Robinson. I feel like we kind of talked about how
I like it.
The Jets just aren't that good at stopping the run, and last week he had 16 attempts and 3 targets, so I'm hoping Arthur Smith gives him the ball again this week. And then I actually went with Zach Moss. Should hopefully get his 3-down roll back with JT missing the week, and he was only $4,600, so it seemed like great value.
Yeah, Joe, what about you? Did you get the Zach Moss as well?
I got him in my flex, so we'll save him for later.
Okay, we'll save it for I feel like a lot of us are going to have Zach Moss.
My running backs were Alvin Kamara, which I like the potential upside with Chris Olave missing. If Olave plays, I still think Kamara is a decent play at home against the Lions, who have a pretty miserable passing defense.
Mm-hmm.
I do think he'll get a lot of targets to be involved in the passing game. And then I went with Jalen Warren to have a bounce back. I think the volume was there last week. The new kind of coaching offensive coordinator said last week they wanted to get him more involved. Obviously, it wasn't his best performance like we talked about, but Arizona is terrible, and I see it as a game they're likely going to be leading. Probably a lot of opportunity to run the ball and not have Kenny Pickett do anything stupid throwing. So yeah, those are I went Kamara and Jalen Warren. Kamara 8,200 and Warren much cheaper. I actually like the value here with Warren, $5,400.
Yeah, solid value. Well, maybe hear that in my flex. What about you, Matt? Who are your running backs?
So my first one I went with was Ramondre Stevenson going up against the Chargers.
Mm-hmm. Their D stinks.
Yeah, their D's not great. I mean, obviously the Patriots' offense is probably worse, but He had a good week against the Giants, and I'm just hoping to ride the hot streak with him. He cost me 6,000, and then I went with actually a running back who's been pretty hot lately, Rashad White of Tampa, going up against Carolina, who's like I think they're like the worst ranked run defense in the league, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of surprised. He was 6,300. He was only 300 more than Ramondre, so I felt like I just had to go with the. I mean, he wasn't cheap, but I feel like he had a great week last week, if I'm not mistaken, and going up against Carolina, I feel like it was something I just had to take advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a top 10 running back, which is why he's in my lineup as well. I have Rashad White. And this is a point per reception league, and he does typically catch a lot of passes as well. I mean, in DraftKings lineups, you get a full point per reception. So, yeah, I had him for 6,300. Zach Moss as well, I had in my lineup for 4,600. So both my guys are mentioned. Zach Moss's matchup's a little tougher, but I still think like he did well against bad matchups early in the season, so I'm not worried. And Rashad White has been a top, I think even like top 7, top 6 running back all season, which has been crazy, and gets a plus matchup. So love the call. Move forward. I'll start with the wide receivers. I have Tyreek at 9,600 paid up because terrified to not have him if he plays because I feel like he's going to go bonanza. I have Terry McLaurin at 5,500, trying to get a piece of that Sam Howell offense. And a good matchup there. Same game as Tyreek. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored, and I'm hoping this is the game where Terry gets a lot of targets. And then finally with wide receiver, I got my stack with Debo. So it was debating between Debo and Ayuk, but Debo is about $1,000 cheaper at 6,200. And he seems like he gets a little bit more targets and in a game that could be a little bit colder. And the way the defense works, I think the closer targets that Debo typically gets over the deeper shots that Ayuk sometimes get, I think might be a little bit more valuable. Plus, you could get a couple of rushes. So Debo at 62, Terry at 5,500, and Tyreek at 9,600. What about you, Rye? Who do you got a wide receiver?
So I also went with Debo. So he was the first wide receiver. He's facing the Eagles. Should be a back and forth game. I actually then went with Josh Downs, matchup against the Titans. Had 97 yards in their first meeting and had 13 targets last week. So hoping he stays hot. And then I also went with Cortland Sutton, who has 8 touchdowns in 11 games played. So I'm going for the touchdown there, and I needed to save a little money.
I dig it. What about you, Joe?
I like the Downs call. To be honest, he was out for a while. He was hurt. Last week was like his first week kind of back, like fully healthy from the injury. And like you said, 13 targets. He was heavily involved. So good call with that one. So I started with my stack with Sam Howell, which this is a challenge with going with Sam Howell. It's tough to stack Washington receivers because who has any idea? So I decided to just go with the cheapest option, and it just so happens to be the most productive option from last week's game, which is Curtis Samuel, $4,100. He got a ton of opportunity last week. I think he had 10 or 11 targets, over 100 yards. And honestly, as an owner of Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin in different leagues, he's just gotten an annoying amount of targets throughout the entire season, quite frankly. So, maybe in a game where they're down and passing the ball a lot, he can do something. And then I spent up $7,300 riding the hot hand with Devontae Smith. I like that game. I think they're going to be passing the ball quite a bit. And the sun god himself, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's been just so incredibly productive all season, rock solid in the lineup, $8,500. New Orleans has a top half defense, and Jared Goff is not the best on the road, which gives me a little pause, but it's on the road in a dome. It's not like he's out in the conditions. It's a little bit more like Ford Field for Goff, and I like the solid floor that I'm getting from Amon-Ra, hopefully to combat against all of your Tyreek.
I love Amon-Ra because the best thing about him, I think this has happened a couple games or now and happened this past week. He's not having a great game, and then if they're down, the last drive or two, he just gets hyper targeted. He was at I think 4 or 5 receptions, and then he last 2 minutes he up to 9 and almost 100 yards. So that's a great call. What about you, Matt?
So I started with paid up for Tyreek because, like you said, Dave, I just would hate
Too
to
scared.
have him in my lineup.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just such a juicy matchup, right? And like Dave said, 9,600. And then I went with Josh Downs as well, like Ryan at
Ooh,
3,100.
Maddie.
Oh, wow.
The reason why I did it, I don't have Zach Moss in my lineup because I was kind of running out of money because between my next receiver, I'm going to say, and Tyreek took up a lot. And, Tennessee's a pretty good run team, but they're pretty bad against the pass. And Minshew's actually played pretty well for the Colts. And I think Joey said it. He's been hurt, and now he's finally back. And him and Pittman are actually a decent duo together.
Mm-hmm.
So I went with Downs, and then I got my stack with Purdy, and I paid up for Brandon Ayuk at 7,200. Part of the reason is I'm really rooting for him in another league because I have an outside shot at the playoffs, and I'm playing actually against Dave.
I know. You will do good because I get lit up by every single team I play in that league.
Well, I'm hoping
All my points against that I don't have in our league is in that league.
True story. A true story. Again, like we said, we said it ad nauseum, but Philadelphia's secondary is just pretty pitiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like with Purdy, I feel like I had to go with the stack with somebody, and I was between him and Debo. Debo, I think, is about 1,000 cheaper, but
Yep.
like I said, I'm rooting for Ayuk in another league, so I said I'm going to double down, and I'm either going to do real well or real poorly in both leagues. So I went with Ayuk at 7,200.
It's part of the fun of this. It's the rooting interest. But Matt, why don't you close out your roster with your tight end, flex, and defense?
Yeah, it's pretty ugly. So I was the tight end's not too bad. I actually went at 3,600 with Logan Thomas
Nice.
against Miami.
Mm-hmm.
The guy's 32, and he's played well this year. I feel like if I can get 8 to 10 points from him, I would be happy. But that's kind of what he's done all year, right?
Yeah.
He was 3,600, and Miami's not the best secondary or defense in general. And then for my flex, I went with Ryan's boy, Jameson Williams.
The dark
is.
I feel like I gotta be man of my word, right? I said he is a nasty boy, right? So I went with a nasty boy in my flex spot. So I'm getting 0 points or I'm getting 20 points out of that. And then with the little money I had left, I just threw the Patriots defense in there for 2,400. I know it's against the Chargers, but I don't know. The Chargers are weird. Keenan Allen is going to probably torch him, but I have Eckler in the Dynasty League, and he has just not seemed like the same player as in the past. And the Patriots played really well. Granted, it was against the Giants last week, but the Patriots defense isn't terrible. So, it's also defense. I feel like you just stream defenses at this point, right? Like
trying to save money.
Yeah.
The Dallas defense or San Francisco defense, it's every week you're just playing the matchup.
Yeah.
So with whatever money I had left, I ended up with $100. I could have upgraded Purdy to Sam Howell, but I, out of principle, refused.
What about you, Joe? Want to close out your lineup?
Yeah, so I too had the New England defense. So I'm with you. I think it's decent savings. The Chargers are weird. They're also not great on the road. It's a cold weather game. They're flying across the country. There's rain. It's the kind of game that I don't anticipate them scoring a ton of points. I don't really anticipate New England scoring a ton of points. So I don't think the Chargers are going to be motivated to score a lot of points. So I think it's a good mucky game for $2,400. If I can get a baseline of 5 or 6 points, it'll be good. In my flex, like I said earlier, I did go with Zach Moss, $4,600 for a starting running back. I thought that was pretty good value, although the matchup isn't great. He excelled in the role earlier in the season, and I'm sure he's pumped to have it back. And then for my tight end, I went with Cade Otton, who actually has been somewhat productive, and for only $3,200, I needed to save a little bit. He's had 4 receptions the last 2 weeks, no touchdowns recently, but going up against Carolina, who's atrocious at home, I felt like there was a hair of touchdown upside there. So originally I had Mike Evans in my lineup, and when I took him out, I'm like, I got to get somebody in this Tampa Bay offense. So ended up going with Cade Otton.
I dig it. I like it. I had the same thought too. I'll jump in quick on mine. I had in my flex, you already kind of mentioned it, but Jalen Warren for 54 going up against the Cards. The Cards, these stinks. We saw Kyron Williams just light him up coming off the IR. So I'm hoping Jalen Warren's explosiveness will exploit that D as well. I actually took for defense the Saints D against the Detroit Lions, kind of to the points that made you a little worried at first for Goff. And Goff could have a bad game and Amaron still be great, which we've seen multiple times this season. But I'm hoping that since it's on the road, it's pretty stout defense. They sack him, maybe get a couple turnovers, build on what was an ugly game for Goff on Thanksgiving afternoon. And then in my tight end, I went with Jawan Johnson, assuming if Olave's out, even I'm praying Olave's in, but if he's out, this goes up even more. But regardless, he's getting a good amount of targets. There's Shaheed's going to be out anyway. Taysom Hill is all over the place, but I think he should still get a pretty good target share. And we mentioned the Lions secondary, like their pass defense is not very strong, so I think Jamal can get some pretty good looks there. So at 3,400, I thought that was good value. And Ryan, why don't you close it out?
Yeah, so for tight end, I actually went with Freiermuth. 11 targets last week, new offensive coordinator. I'm hoping the momentum continues this week. Flex, I went with Rachaad White. So, we talked about him. He has over 15 points per game the last 6 games, and he now gets the Panthers, who are 30th against the run. And then on defense, I actually went with the Falcons because they're playing Tim Boyle.
Yeah. Can't go wrong there. That's all you got to say. Yeah. Looks at it, Tim Boyle, defense. Okay, take it.
And then I also had an extra $100 like Matt. So,
nice.
Couldn't upgrade anyone, though. Felt pretty good with this lineup.
Great. Well, I'm excited. We'll see. I think this will be an interesting matchup. We do have a lot of more overlap than I was expecting. So it should be interesting to see which ones step up and if Matt can take us out. Last time, I think Schluter struck out. So doing all right. Or Schluter didn't get anyone. But with that, I want to say thank you for listening to the NSFW Dynasty Podcast. Go up with your final playoff pushes unless you're playing me. See you guys later.
You guys.
NSFW Dynasty Podcast. Tune in next time